Hi everyone! I wanted to make hopefully a short video about the new panel that I'm releasing, Lasso Draw. People who follow me might have a slight feeling of déjà vu, and they will be correct. I first mentioned this panel probably 2 years ago, and it was finished more than a year and a half ago. So the number of times I answered that it's going to be released in 2 weeks in the past year and a half is quite large. But because of reasons, I only publish it now. I'm releasing it for free, and if I have time in the end of the video, I'll maybe explain why is it like this. The video will consist of a small introductional chapter on installing the extension, system requirements, and then I'll talk about the panel interface and various modes. On the screen you can see the manual for the panel that I wrote, and I think it's quite detailed, so to make the video quick, I'll probably just read parts from it, making this video some sort of a visual aid to the panel manual. But of course, if there is something that doesn't make much sense or feels obscure, feel free to drop me a message on Discord or via email. Questions about installation emerge quite often, so I thought, why not mention it in a video and share it for all the cases like this. Installation usually is very simple and takes seconds, and after you unzip the downloaded file, you'll see several folders and the 2 PDFs, one with a usual license for people who are into this, and installation and quick start guide. There are several installation methods that vary depending on the level of trust you have for me, for a random someone from internet. The fastest and the easiest way is running a native installer. So on Windows, it's an exe file in the install Windows folder. If I simply double click it, it will ask my permission, and then I can install it, and after a second it's done. What it does, it basically copies all the files of the panel to a specific folder where Photoshop knows where to look for the panel, and also it copies some necessary scripts. Well, not necessary, additional scripts to the Photoshop scripts folder, and this folder is read-only, and that's why it requires an admin access. On the Mac, it's basically the same thing, with the difference that if you just double-click the package file, the macOS security layer will tell you that the file is it's not a great idea to open the file. So what you can do is right-click on the file and use the open command from the context menu. This way, there will be an option to open the file in the menu, and then you just run the installer the same way as on Windows. This is also mentioned in the quick start guide. Like if you're on Mac, instead of double clicking, press right mouse button, choose open. Voilà. All that is also available as a text version. So those are native installers. Another option is installing using the ZXP. It's a format for the extensions, by the way, which is essentially just a zip file, but with a specific manifest inside. Well, anyway, also in the README, there is a link to the ZXP installer. This is a third-party tool made by the community of developer for After Effects. And the reason why this tool exists is because Adobe dropped support quite some time ago. So now the ZXP could be installed with a third-party tool. Also, like, important note is that there is this ZXP installer, but also there is a different one. But also there is a different one. This one. So this one won't work. It doesn't work with the modern Photoshops, and it has the same name, so yeah, it could be a little bit confusing. But just if you see the large square, don't go with it. A large cube, don't go with it. So this should be quite straightforward. And the last option is manual install, which is basically doing the same things that native installers do, just copying different files into different locations. There are specific paths where all the files should be extracted, and it's quite straightforward. The only probably important thing that on Windows, the easiest way of extracting file would be if you have WinRAR installed, right-clicking on the file and use extract to folder, because inside the zip, it's not a folder but a bunch of files. So if you just simply extract the zip into the extensions folder, it will extract all these files, and the extension won't work. So what should be done is, in this Adobe CAP extensions folder, there should be a folder for the extension, and there will be this bunch of files that you'll find in the zip. I hope this makes sense. Okay, and a little note on the Mac machines. As we'll see in the quick start guide, basically Macs with M1, M2, and all this new generation of processors, they are not currently supported. And there is a way of running extensions. It's running Photoshop with a Rosetta layer. Possible to Google. It's just a matter of turning one option, and this way Photoshop starts using the translation layer, which allows the usage of older extensions that are disabled in the native version. And this makes Photoshop a little bit slower, but then it depends how much do you want the extensions to work. So the reason why they don't work specifically on Macs is that Adobe currently is changing the framework of the extensions. It's like basically the engine of the extensions, and all my extensions are written in the old version, and the new one I hate it, but at some point I will have to rewrite everything to support this new engine. And I started Lasso Draw, as I mentioned, years ago, and all the other extensions even before that. So it's like the huge, it's a lot of work of rewriting all that. Plus, the new framework doesn't support certain features. So yeah, it's a huge pain in the ass. And at some point, all the extensions will stop working. We don't know when. If I go to Photoshop, we will see that extensions are marked as legacy, and all the new things will appear in the plugins menu. And Adobe didn't give us the exact time frame when this the older framework will disappear. So when all the extensions just basically stop working, maybe it will be in a month, maybe it will be in a year, maybe like in 5 years. This new framework was introduced 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 4, I think 3. And still no news. So sorry for the boring introduction, but I still receive a lot of messages about installation, and hopefully it answers some questions. Now we're done with the installation. Let's finally switch to Photoshop and see the panel in action. So after the installation, the panel will be available in the Window Extensions Legacy Lasso Draw, and yeah, it consists of quite a lot of different buttons, but it's quite simple. Let me get to it. One important thing is that with scripts and panels, you can't really add tools like in this tool thing in the tool panel. So one important thing to mention is that Lasso Draw isn't the usual Photoshop tool like a brush or a move tool. This is because with scripts you actually can't create new tools, so rather than a tool, it's a mode for selection tools and a line tool, but later about that. It's an easy way to automate the process of acting on a selection. The way the panel works is it waits for you to create a selection and then acts on it. meaning that Lasso Draw should be turned on or off using these large buttons on the top. And this could be done directly on the panel, so I can click on the add. The panel automatically switches to the lasso tool, and now every time I'm going to paint a selection, it's going to be automatically filled. The same thing also can be done with a keyboard shortcut. I already have it mapped to my keyboard key, so if I click, you can see the mode changes. So I can draw something, then I can switch it off. I can use selection to maybe modify my beautiful drawing, and then I can switch to add with a shortcut again, modify it further, something like that. Just now I was using cut. You can add with lasso, but you can also cut and or clear. This has a separate button on the panel, so I can switch to the clear mode. And now creating selections will clear, but this is obviously a little bit boring. And there is an option to do that with a keyboard modifier. If I start my selection and then I hold Ctrl or Command key, then I let go of my selection, the selection will cut from the active layer. It's like this. And that's why the panel key switches between off and add, and not between all the three modes, because clear mode can be always used as a key. It's just if you don't really use the keyboard shortcuts, it's still an option to be used from a panel bar. And also, when you work with selections, one thing you can notice, and that is that you can't easily pick a color, because if you with a brush, it would be Alt click. But if you have a selection tool selected, Alt click will just start, like in case of lasso, it will just start to paint with a polygonal tool. So there is also a modifier shortcut for picking a color when using Lasso Draw. If I turn it on and say I want to pick, I have a yellow now, so say I want to pick a gray color, I start my selection. The selection doesn't matter anymore, the first point matters. And if I hold Shift key now and I let go, you see the color is picked now. So I can play with gray. I can pick the yellow, maybe add a little thing, pick gray again, another little thing, pick black, another little thing, and so on and so on. So the next row of buttons is opacity toggle. Is setting opacity for the selection. By default, it's obviously 100, but could be changed to something else. Sometimes this is useful, especially with specific modes, when you want the effect to be more subtle. The values here, 20, 40, up to 100, they also can be changed from the flyout menu, from the options, but this is for later. If I shift click this menu, it's going to change to feather settings. So I can make my selection soft, which is sometimes quite useful for doing like more gradient-y things, for making soft things. So shift toggles between opacity and feather. And the last row of buttons is different modes. Currently I'm in the fill mode, the most basic mode, that simply fills the selection with color. but I like to have to hide as many different things on the panel with different modifiers as possible. And this is a terrible habit, but this is the way the things are. If you shift click some on the top row of buttons, there will be small overlay with options of the current mode. So the fill mode doesn't have much options. It only has two. Always create new layers, which I guess speaks for itself, and the symmetry along a guide, which is quite an interesting thing, I think. If I create a guide, I make a new layer, and I start to make the make selections. Well, you can see they get symmetrified, which is quite nice. Which could be very nice for drawing silhouettes and stuff. The direction of the symmetry is determined by the first point of the selection. So if I place my first point on this side, nothing will happen because it only symmetrifies this part. So I would rather go something like this. Some of these options are shared between different modes. Some are unique for the modes, but we will talk about them a little bit later. So to sum up, switch the tool on and off with buttons or with keyboard shortcut. Switch opacity, switch feather, and switch different modes. So now just several words about the flyout menu. Because, well, yeah, it has a lot of buttons, but most of them are just mirrors of what you see already on the panel. It's possible to switch modes from this menu. Why? Because it's possible to hide both modes and opacity feather menu. So the panel could be very compact, especially if you always work in one specific mode, say the fill mode. So I can just have it like very small and just see the status of it, if it's on or off. I'm going to. Then there's a huge window with settings. Those are just different settings for each mode, and also which modes are visible on the panel. If there are just too many buttons and you don't use specific modes, so just they could be hidden from the panel. There is a smooth selection option, but currently I'm not sure about it. It makes. Let me demonstrate it quickly. So this is how it works without the smooth selection, and if I turn it on, like it goes like this. Basically it's smooth. It's more visible on the, like, it can smooth very sharp corners, but it makes the panel much slower. Like you see, like it takes about 2 seconds to fill the selection. So maybe it's just not the best way of smoothing it. I don't know. If you know good ways of and fast ways of smooth selections, please let me know. And other than that, for custom actions, this menu is quite important. But once again, later about that. For smooth selections, it's probably just it's much better to use Lazy Nizumi Pro. It's so powerful and great, and it's great for not only for creating selections, but also for drawing. Like if I have this off, I have like all these junky selections. If I turn it on, I'm getting the smoothest selections possible. Anyhow, let me quickly kill this guy. These two options, always create new layers and symmetry along guide, they share it between all the modes, and so they are here. And here there are several additional options that determine the way how the panel can be deactivated. For example, there is an option to turn off the panel when switching to non-selection tools. If I turn it on, if I switch to a brush tool, the panel goes automatically off. This is useful when you just want to fill an area, and then you go to a brush tool, and then you paint, and you forgot that you had the panel turned on. So then you switch to selection, and it just acts like a selection. And then I can just activate the panel back again with, for example, with my hotkey. The other options turn off when closing the panel. So this one I like a lot. Because, for example, I have my panel on, right? So it fills the selection, and then I just hide it. And now I have my selections working as usual. So basically, I know it only works when it's visible. Use shift for color picking, which is on by default. This is what I was talking earlier, how you can color pick the color if the shift is held twice selection is made. Close and click, quite obvious. If I click anything, the panel will close. And use icons for the fill modes. The fill modes are these guys. If this is turned off, the first letter of the mode is shown instead. I actually prefer this way, but there are also icons. And here, just the options to change the layout, because there's also vertical layout, because why not? I prefer the horizontal one. And yeah, two options that turn off the visibility of the modes menu and the paste menu. And there are settings for those modes where it's possible to set specific the number of feather and the number of opacity buttons. So you see I have the 20, 40, 60, 80, 20, 40, 60, 80, and the same for feather. But for feather, I can also set the specific feather values. For example, if 60 is too small or too large, I can make them much more defined. And the option for assign the panel shortcuts. As you can see, I have my toggle mode that I use to show the panel assigned to F3. So here, just tap F3 and it's done. Open data folder will open the folder where the settings of the panel are located. If you want to backup it, you can do it from there. And the panel manual will open the panel manual. All the things that I'm discussing now are also written here in text. So if I talk nonsense, obviously you can just go through the written pages here. So now with the boring stuff out of the way, I think we can talk about the modes, because some of them are quite fun to use. So we already talked about the basic fill mode. The next one is a gradient mode, and it does exactly what it says. It creates a gradient by default from the first point to the point that's furthest away from the first point. And sometimes it's not easy to control, but it can create some interesting abstract shapes. But let me try something. There are several types of gradients. So this was from the first point, and once again, if I shift click on the top row of the buttons, this little menu opens. The next type is perpendicular. This creates a gradient that's perpendicular to the first and last point. So it will go upwards. So I can do something like this, and then I can do something like this, and then something like this. And the last mode is mix. Mix creates a gradient of the first color where I clicked and the furthest away point. So this mode is this mode sometimes creates interesting shapes. Probably not for the head, but like, you know. Can be used in various ways. And it's possible to inverse the gradient direction and randomize the color, but we'll talk about the randomized color a little bit later. Let me just turn it on and use the first point, maybe to make some beautiful petals. As you can see, the colors are quite dramatically randomized. It's because there's this when I switched on the randomized color, this little thing appeared with a plus and minus sign, and this 80 number determines how far away the colors, like in the RGB numbers, how far away they are randomized. So 80 means that the current color, which is black, is randomized in 40, I guess. So it makes the 80 range, and it's probably too much. So I can change it to something like 40. But I have black color, which doesn't make much sense. Okay, I have no green now. Okay, still quite strong. Maybe like 2016. I can use Shift and click for larger jumps, and I think it's Alt click for super small one. Up. So yeah, now it's just different shades of green, except for this one orange. Okay, now it's gone. And also the gradient mode, it can be used with the line tool. So when I switch to the line tool, some of the modes become grayed out. Those are the modes that you can imagine aren't usable with the line tool, but some of them are available, and gradient is one of them. So when I draw my line, you can see it creates a gradient from the first to the last point. But what's more interesting in this mode is when it's used with the perpendicular type of the gradient, because this creates a gradient that goes on the side of the line, and it could be useful for creating shadows and stuff like this. Let's go back to the lasso tool, and the next mode is average. The average averages the colors in the selected area. So for example, here, if I make a selection, something like this, it will create the average color of this area. It can be used for removing details, you know, for creating stylized, like crystallized look, but in the specific areas. For destroying a gradient, for example, to create, I can create something like scales. It's almost like painting with a brush, but I don't have to pick colors. I only use selection tool. And it also works quite well with opacity set to lower values, because if I create a layer from everything and I do something like this, I can start average areas, but very lightly, and also create some stylized, interesting look. But still, I saw some people do quite cool things with it. Some of the beta testers with the average and lower opacity. So I leave it to you to test. Try things out. Alrighty. So the next one is a random color. It's like fill with color, but it adds randomization. So once again, so say I want to have a different head. Now every new stroke will have a randomized color. And by default, I think I turned it off. By default, it has a preserve color lightness option turned on, because you see now the color, they are randomly changed, but the lightness isn't the same. So you can see how like this color is much lighter than this the violet one. But with the preserve color lightness option on, it will try to keep the lightness the same. So if I go to grays, you see that the lightness doesn't change much. Let me undo that because I started on the same layer as my beautiful bird. So yeah, the amount of randomization is controlled with this little thing. Okay, what's next? Next is the noise. Noise is fun. Noise creates noise gradients. They're sometimes nice to feel like larger areas. There are different options of how they interact with colors beneath them, and also the types of noise, because this one is a linear one. There is also a radial, creates radial patterns. There is also a radial that starts from a specific point. The people who use heavy paint, they can probably guess where the inspiration comes from, but obviously Photoshop can't create the same way, the same sort of noisy gradient, so it's just an imitation. Still, I think it's sometimes can be interesting for larger abstract stuff. And then I can go to my average with lower opacity and start averaging these areas. If I think they are too wild. And maybe turn on the feather, so it's also averages them softly. And the last two modes are a little bit more crazy. So the next one is a custom one. Custom mode plays an action every time you create a fill. Actually, I will leave my beautiful scene. So how this works? I have my actions panel, and I have several actions in a set. The set is called LG patterns, and if I go to the mode settings, custom action options, there is this set that I have set as a set. Beautiful. I can select an action here, but it's not that important. The set is the most important part, because you can't switch it. I can't switch it from the panel. Actions I can, but not the set. So I set the set. I save my set of the set. And now, if I shift click to show the options, I can cycle through the actions. Which one I want to use? For example, colorful. I will remove this guy. Okay, so let me just quickly demonstrate it. You see, I create selections, and it gets filled with a texture, because in my action, if I get back the action, in my action I have one step that fills with a pattern with overlay mode in 25 opacity. So this is exactly what's done with the selection every time I draw it. So let's go to the next one. Painterly. What's that? Okay, it's also some sort of a pattern. Okay, fill texture. I guess it's the same thing. Yeah, same thing, just a different pattern. So I can create different ways of filling my scene with patterns, and these patterns only will be available where I create my selection. Next one is crystallize. So crystallize applies a crystallize filter also to the selection. So I draw a selection and it gets crystallized automatically. And the last one I have here is fuzzy fill. Yeah, fuzzy fill is what it does is let me just remove this, guys. What it does, it slightly breaks the contour of my selection. So you see, it's not ideal anymore. Which once again could be nice for something more stylized. And the way it works, it goes to a quick mask, then it applies a spatter filter to the mask, and then it fills with the foreground color. I have my green as foreground, so it fills with it. I select a different color, it starts to fill with it. It starts to fill with a different color. So the custom mode plays actions. And the last thing is a transform mode. So this one is a little bit weird. Let me just create something similar to what I have in the manual, just some sort of a crystal thing. I'll just move it right here. So transform mode, create copies of the layer based on selection. It's easier to demonstrate. Let me just start creating selections and you see how it goes. I find this mode very useful for filling scenes with stuff. Like little stones, thorns, trees. Like you see how like just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. They are all by default are in the folder, and there are options to create separate files or merged layers. So, so if I continue, it will just merge them all in the same group, in the same folder. And there are also options to bend transform and to snap transforms. So if I select bend transform, it will do this. So we see how if I draw a selection like this, it goes like this. If I draw a selection like this, it goes to different sides, a different side. So something like this, once again, something like torrents. And obviously they are scaled depending on the length of my selection. This tool is a little bit finicky with undos, because I have to press like 3 times to undo each clone. The whole way this panel does undo is a voodoo magic. So yeah, it's weird. Something to keep in mind. So if I undo and it doesn't work, I just need to keep undo. But other than that, it's quite fun. And snap is just to make sure the clones are quite straight. If I draw them like this, see, even if my selection goes a little bit awkward, all the clones are snapped to 45 degrees. This mode also works with the line tool. So if I go to my line tool, I can use it. If I select with the line, it's there's a little bit more control with angle, because I can have the line quite narrow, and then just basically set the angle I want my assets to be. Obviously, it won't work with the bend option, but for just posing the assets, it's quite nice. It also works a little bit slower than the selection tool, but nothing too terrible. Obviously, this tool also works if I have my layer as a smart object. So if I convert it to smart, oops, I should the line tool won't work because it tries to paint on the layer. Yeah, so when the layer is a smart object, it only works with selection. I have my bend. Yeah, I have my bend off. So yeah, if I add the layers, they all smart objects, and if I modify that one, for example, if I make a little hole here, they all are instanced. And another little thing is that, let me, for example, have them a little bit different. Yeah, this is not very different. Okay, so something like this, and maybe I want to have this one like this, and this one whatever, like this. And I select all three of them and go to transform mode again, and I start adding. The tool will randomly select one of the selected layers. So this is also nice for something like trees. Okay, I think I said everything. It's still long. It's quite long. Oh my god. So yeah, in the beginning of the video I mentioned about the panel being free and why. And as you probably saw, I haven't made any beautiful paintings with this panel. And Lasso Draw is, for me, it's one of the projects that I probably won't really use in my daily workflow. And this is very different for all my other panels. Like brush writer I use every day, all the time. Like all my tools are here. I have a second brush writer panel with all the scripts and all the actions I use. It's super useful for me. Modificator I use every day to set different options for the tools. Layer Factory I use every day for creating layers and using different modes and layer things. But Lasso Draw painting, I know a lot of people like to draw with clean shapes, but it's just not the way I like working. I like to take a brush to paint dirty, or maybe make a paint over of the 3D work. There's no much like flat work in this for me. Basically, quite a lot of people requested to create this tool, so I thought, oh yeah, well, yeah, why not, whatever. The thing is, because I don't use it every day, and this is not a workflow that interests me, it will be difficult to make sure it works in next versions of Photoshop. It will be difficult to maybe fix some very particular bugs. There were several people who were beta testing this panel for this year and a half. Yeah, I would say the panels, maybe there are minor bugs, but it works quite flawlessly. But still, if there is something, it's going to be such a pain in the ass to fix or update it, or like what I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the way with the frameworks of Adobe and how I'll have to rewrite all the panels. Lasso Draw won't be in the priority list of these panels, so I will start with perspective tools, and then probably brush writer, and then probably layer factory and modificator and all that. But Lasso Draw will be probably near the end of this list. So there is that, and I always felt like I'm kind of do this for the likes, you know, because all the other tools I'm making also for Blender, for example, those are the things I use every day myself. And I think that's why they're not terrible. There's some quality to them. Oh, I'm a solo developer, and I'm not actually a developer, So a lot of things could be made much better by a team or a professional developer and a better artist. So I kind of made Lasso Draw just because people requested it, and I kind of wish I didn't, because there are several panels that do the same thing, and they were released earlier. Maybe they have a little bit less features, but there's a panel by Kyle Webster that was released half a year ago. It's quite basic, but it works, and it works on the new framework, so it works on the M1 Max and all that. So maybe grab it. And this development of Lasso Draw, it was just such a downer all the time. I don't know. It's just it was super fun in the beginning when the things were working, but more. It's not about even the number of features, because a lot of the modes or features of like additional stuff, they all exist on the basic workflow that was established on the panel. So it's not like those features took a lot of time to develop. No. It's just general. I'm not sure in what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I don't like this. I don't like this panel. I'm not going to use it. I like the transform mode. I use it from time to time, but I will never open the panel and start the fill mode, and we'll like start, I don't know, dancing with my tablet, listening to some music and creating shapes in Photoshop. No, that's not me. It's not my workflow. I don't like it. That's what I want to say. And these 2 years, oh my god, the timing for this panel was just the worst, because there were so many weird things were happening, and there were good things. Because my studio, the studio where I work, Tindalos, we just released a new game, and it's still in the news and trending. The game, in the Aliens universe, Aliens franchise, which I'm obviously a huge fan of, and I was working as a concept artist, and then later as an art director on this game. And this 3 years was such a blast. It was just like, wow. And people seem to enjoy the game, which is amazing. It's just such a nice feeling when you were working, and the effort the team put it into this. There was so many limitations, so many difficult things. But I had a lot of things to do when I started to work as an art director on this project, and I didn't have much time or energy on anything else. It was just so difficult. And in the same moment, my wife and me, we moved to a different apartment, and we were making there were some works in the apartment, so that also didn't leave a lot of opened windows for releasing, because releasing is hard. Releasing something is so hard. It's just, you have to think about so many little things, about different pictures, about images, about marketing, about this video. Oh my god, I hate this video. And those were the good things. And but then the war has happened, and even though I don't live in Russia for more than 9 years now, I still hold the Russian passport, and my parents are in Russia, and it's just it's so depressing. So depressing. I know for a lot of people it's much worse, and I'm just depressed, and there are people who are actually dying because of the acts of in quotes elected president of my country, not my country, of the country where I was born. There's a perfect word that I don't think can be translated to English in Russian. It's the word toska. it's like spleen, but deeper. Not necessarily depression, but just a feel of dread, something like that. And for months, it's like hopelessness. Yeah. In terms of morale and energy, these 2 years were complicated. I think that releasing this panel, I should have released it 2 years ago, but I haven't. And I can't take money from people for this panel now, because I don't know when it's going to stop working. If you enjoy it, if this kind of workflow with shapes and painting with a selection tool is your thing, awesome. I hope you enjoy the panel. I think it's a good panel. I think it's functional. It's just I don't like it personally. But hopefully someone will. Sorry about this rant. It's been a long time since I posted on any social platforms, or my last YouTube video is from a year and a half ago also. Maybe it's time to get back on track. And first of all, re-release perspective tools for UXP to see how this beast works, if it's completely terrible or just terrible, and little by little get back on track. Okay, I wish you all the best, and have a good day.